Thank you. I will keep doing this, and I'll apologize. Has anyone been convicted of the crime of working with the Russian government associated with the Trump campaign that you know of?
Not that I know of.
Well, they haven't. Mm-hmm. So whatever convictions have been attained got nothing to do with colluding with the Russians. That's what got us here. And about what happened here. If the government is surveilling an American citizen pursuant to a FISA warrant, and the government comes in, information is given to the government that questions the foundation of the warrant, is there an obligation to tell the court?
Absolutely.
They did not do that here, is that correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, they lied to the court about the information they had that was exculpatory to Mr. Page.
They gave misleading, inaccurate information.
At what point can a surveillance that started lawfully become illegal?
It can become unauthorized, inappropriate, illegal, depending upon the facts.
Would you apply all those terms to what happened in this case?
I'm going to let others who have the ability to address some of these issues decide what the precise level of intent was.
Here's what I'm going to say. It may have started lawfully. Mm-hmm. It got off the rails quick. It became a criminal conspiracy to defraud the FISA court, to put Mr. Page through hell, and to continue to surveil President Trump after he got elected. And I hope somebody pays a price for that. You've certainly done your part, Mr. Horowitz. Mm-hmm. Senator Ernst.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Inspector General, for being here today and presenting this information. And I know that a couple others have focused on this, and I'd like to dive back in. But first, there is a lot of respect out there, or there has been, for the FBI. And I remember as a kid, watching movies or shows that portrayed the FBI, and we really thought, wow, those are the good guys. And I think what we have seen through the past number of years, number of months, is that a few bad actors have really squandered that away. And I think the American people look at the FBI and they think, wow, if they're doing this to a presidential candidate, what would they do to me as just a normal American citizen? Are they really there for me? So I'm just so sorry that this has led to this. Again, a few very bad actors. I heard somebody earlier saying, oh, the mistakes that were made at the FBI, the mistakes. It's not like, oops, I accidentally filed a FISA warrant or an application, a FISA application. Oops, that accidentally happened. That's not a mistake. It just reeks of ill wishes to do harm. So again, I just think the FBI, we've always thought of it as such a great institution, and now I'm looking at all this information. We've all reviewed the report, and I think, for God's sakes, what is going on here? So thank you for doing this work. I think it's just really important we take a look at what's going on, why it happened. And I'd like to focus a little more just on the discipline aspect of this, because these mistakes were made by some people that really wanted to do bad harm to an individual illegally. So Peter Strzok was fired from the FBI. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay,
so he still has a Merit System Protection Board that is not yet adjudicated. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Does that mean that the termination is final or not final?
I'm going to get ahead of my legal employment law capabilities if I give you too many opinions on what his legal rights are in that regard.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It seems that there was only one individual referred for possible criminal prosecution based on the IG review, and that's the person that altered the email to imply that Carter Page was not or never a source for another agency. So with that apparent concealment of facts from the FISA court, especially as they relate to the accuracy of Steele's reporting, can you explain why there were no more criminal referrals?
What we ultimately decided was that the conduct here warranted sending the entire report to the FBI and the department for review for review from the line agent all the way to the top of people who were still at the FBI. And as we said, we didn't see documentary and testimonial evidence of intent, but we also didn't hear good explanations, which left us with an open question on what the motive was and what the state of mind was. And the adjudicative process at the FBI and the department will now assess that and look at that.
So, so we don't know of anyone else that has been fired or reassigned?
I don't know as I sit here. That would have to come from
Okay.
the FBI or the department.
Okay. So with that, how many case agents involved with the FISA applications in your report are still active case agents today?
As I sit here, I can't tell you the precise number. There are several who still are.
That are active
That are still active agents. Whether they're still in certain roles or not, I don't know.
Okay, because you don't know specifically if they're still working as case agents, do you believe if they were working as case agents that the information contained in your report as it relates to those case agents should be released to other criminal defendants under the department's Giglio policy?
I think this raises those kinds of issues for the department to review and consider what they have to do to remedy any wrongs here.
And for those folks that are watching this back at home in Iowa, can you talk a little bit about the Giglio policy?
So in criminal cases, for example, when an agent is found to have engaged in misconduct, whether by a judge or by the Department of Justice, there's an obligation under a Supreme Court case called the Giglio case to notify the defendant of the wrongdoing or harm or misconduct, impeachable evidence, those sorts of things. And that obligation is taken seriously, has to be taken seriously. As I said, I've done law enforcement corruption cases as an AUSA, and one of the first things we do, including now as IG when we find issues, is notify prosecutors and the department and law enforcement to ensure that they take appropriate steps in a timely way to make sure those agents, or if it's prosecutors, but agents we're here talking about, aren't continuing to pursue cases or aren't allowed to stay in those positions if they've violated the trust that they've been given.
No, and I think that's important. The reason we're talking a little bit about this and discipline, policy, and procedures is because the American people, again, when they look at an institution like the FBI, they want to know that they are good guys. And if they are not good guys, they need to go. I think the American public gets tired of seeing bad actors with no repercussions.
Very, very important from our standpoint as the Inspector General's office that there be accountability for all conduct across the board, but certainly for misconduct and performance failures, and those need to be taken into account.
Yeah, performance failures, lying. I mean, there was a lot going on in the department. They weren't just mistakes, as somebody casually mentioned. These are not just mistakes. This was bad conduct. It was intentional. So I do think that as we see this move forward, that anybody that was involved in those malicious activities is gone. So a little bit about policy and procedures, just very quickly. The IG's office has previously identified a pattern of leaks and improper contact between FBI employees and the media. Part of the decision to work the Crossfire Hurricane case out of the FBI headquarters, it does seem to be due to the fear of leaks if it were actually worked out in the field. So can you characterize how much of a problem leaks are and those unauthorized contacts between the media and members within the FBI?
So we identified this last year in our Clinton election report, the number of contacts, and we've seen it as we've done these reports subsequent to that in finding inappropriate, improper contact between agents and the media. Since our report last year, Director Wray has put out a new policy and undertaken new training to deal with that, or to try to address that and to change the culture, which is what we talked about a year ago. But the culture and the viewpoint of in a federal criminal investigation, fairness to the defendant, or the subject of the investigation, fairness to victims, if there are victims, fairness to the process requires people, agents who are working these cases, to keep their head down, work the case, and not disclose information to outside parties, whether it's the media, friends, relatives, neighbors, whomever. That information has to stay in the office.
And so there has been a policy change, but what are the repercussions if someone is found guilty of engaging in those unauthorized contacts with media?
So that's one of the things we're going to follow up with the FBI on, as we've done these cases over the last year. As we've referred them, what's actually been the penalty that's been imposed? What's happened to those folks, and how is that message getting out? Not just publicly, but internally, that there are going to be consequences for that. Because without the consequences, the deterrent effect goes away.
Right, absolutely. And there is no restoration of trust in the agency if there are not repercussions to those that are maliciously pursuing these types of activities. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your team and the work that they put into the report. And in all fairness, we've got to do better. And we've got a long ways to go to restore trust in the FBI and anyone working with the FBI. So, again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Senator Harris, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Horowitz, thank you for conducting your thorough investigation into the origins of the Department of Justice's Russia investigation. So your report makes clear that the FBI had a legitimate reason to investigate the Trump campaign. Is that correct?
That's right. There was sufficient predication.
And in addition, your office found no evidence that the FBI launched a politically motivated investigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And another key finding was that the FBI committed several errors in his applications and in their applications to surveil Carter Page.
Or maybe more than several.
And as the FBI Director Wray himself has acknowledged, your investigation found serious FBI misconduct that needs to be addressed, and Director Wray also said that the FBI fully accepts your investigation's findings. Is that correct? On the other hand, Attorney General Barr has been highly critical of your findings. During the final stages of your investigation, he even embarked on his own personal investigation by meeting with foreign leaders in foreign lands, apparently in search of evidence that contradicts the fact that Russia interfered in the 2016 United States presidential election to benefit Trump. Clearly, Barr's investigation, which was launched to do the bidding of President Trump, has two objectives. One, to undermine the integrity of our intelligence community. The goal, to cast doubt on the finding that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in order to benefit the Trump campaign. And two, to intimidate the men and women of our intelligence community by suggesting that our national security professionals will face serious consequences if they investigate wrongdoing on the part of this president or his operatives. So, General Horowitz, I appreciate your extensive work and the work that your office has devoted to this investigation. But in addition, you have the power and the duty to investigate misconduct committed by the Attorney General of the United States, who is doing the bidding of the president to undermine our intelligence community. And I trust you take that duty seriously.
I do, and I'd just like to add that under the law, under the Inspector General Act, it carves out from my authority the ability to look at misconduct by department lawyers from the line lawyer all the way to the top and the Attorney General.
But history has also shown us that the Inspector General can participate in an investigation of the Attorney General, and that in fact happened with General Gonzalez. Do you recall that?
That happened, and it's worth noting, that happened after the Attorney General said our office was not going to get the case, that it was going to go to the Office of Professional Responsibility, and the choice for our office was whether to join that investigation or not. But that wasn't initiated through us.
So
that's the important point. The law has to change, Senator, and it should change.
So are you recommending the law?
Absolutely.
If I propose legislation that would change the law, would you support that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's legislation Senator Lee has sponsored, several members have co-sponsored. The House has passed this unanimously.
And you would support it?
Absolutely, 100%.
So it was recently reported that the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, asked Ukrainians to help search for dirt of the political rivals of the president. In exchange for the help, Giuliani offered to help fix criminal cases against them at DOJ. Giuliani and his associates, 2 of whom have been indicted and are now in federal custody, allegedly reached out to a Ukrainian energy tycoon who faced legal problems in America. In exchange for helping find dirt on the president's political rivals, Giuliani's associates reportedly connected the Ukrainian with lawyers who could get a top-level meeting at the United States Department of Justice. In essence, Giuliani's scheme was an attempt to trade get-out-of-jail-free cards for political favors. As part of Giuliani's plan, Attorney General Barr met with the Ukrainians' lawyers, who asked that the Department of Justice withdraw evidence in the tycoon's bribery prosecution. Earlier today, you said you are not investigating matters related to ongoing Ukraine issues. Does that mean that you have decided not to investigate these incidents?
No. As I think mentioned in a recent letter, and I've been in touch with fellow IGs who've been asked by members to look at those issues. We've been in communication with each other. I think as Mr. Fine, the Defense Department IG, wrote to several members of Congress, he was foregoing at the time undertaking any work while the House investigation proceeded and any matters here in the Senate. And, as I mentioned, we will look accordingly at any action that we have the jurisdiction to review, getting back to the Section 80 discussion. No other IG has that limitation, by the way. So they can investigate their secretary, deputy secretary, administrator, whomever. I just point that out because that's important to keep in mind as we get requests. And why are we different than the State Department IG, the EPA IG, the other IGs?
Couldn't agree with you more. Do you agree that if true, Giuliani's scheme is alarming?
I think anything like that would be very concerning.
And Mr. Giuliani recently returned to Ukraine in search of dirt on the president's political rivals, apparently in order to cook up a dossier of his own. Yesterday, he told reporters that President Trump asked him to brief the Justice Department and Senate Republicans on what, if anything, he finds. Do you and are you concerned that the Justice Department would coordinate with the president's personal lawyer on a scheme clearly designed to benefit the president's political campaign?
I'm going to look at the evidence myself and facts. I've learned to, before taking any action, to not just rely on news reports or other allegations, but to actually spend the time to look at them. So I'd ask to take a look at that, and again, happy to come in and meet with you and talk with you about it.
Please do. I'd appreciate that. Is it appropriate for the Attorney General or anyone at the Department of Justice to take actions that are solely designed to benefit the president politically?
I think that would create questions about on various rules at the department and practices at the department.
During Attorney General Barr's last appearance before this committee, I asked him, has the president or anyone at the White House ever suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? After pondering the word suggest, the Attorney General declined to answer. The Attorney General's non-response suggested to many that he has opened politically motivated investigations. Indeed, we know that during a call with the president of Ukraine, President Trump said that Attorney General Barr would follow up regarding the quote-unquote favor that the president demanded. Did the Attorney General or anyone at Justice follow up with the president's call?
I don't know the answer to that question. And
Does
again,
anyone in your office know the answer to that question?
I don't believe anybody in my office would know it. And frankly, again, it gets to the question of a decision by the Attorney General whether to open an investigation or not, which in most instances, I won't foreclose it completely, but in most instances would fall squarely within the prohibition on my jurisdiction.
President Trump's phone conversation was an apparent effort to solicit foreign interference in the 2020 election. And the call involved officials at multiple agencies, including the Department of Justice, the State Department, the Office of Management and Budget, and others. Are you working with the inspectors general of these various agencies on that issue?
As I mentioned, allegations that come in, we'll talk with our fellow IGs.
On that specific one, are you working with other IGs?
We're not, I don't have any ongoing work at this point. Again, I'm not sure what my legal, if I'd have a statutory authority to look at actions by lawyers at the department related to misconduct.
Have you been approached by any other IGs to work with them on an investigation that related to that phone call?
I'll say we've had discussions generally. I don't know whether other IGs at this point have or do not have ongoing investigations.
You've had conversations generally about this phone call?
About generally Ukraine-related matters and discussions generally.
How about specifically about this phone call?
I don't recall, as I sit here, discussions about it, but again, I have to
You have to refresh your memory?
refresh my recollection on this issue. I've obviously been spending a fair amount of time preparing to deal with the 400-plus page report that we're talking about today.
Involving Ukraine?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, right.
Yeah, okay. The American system of justice was founded on the principle of equal justice under the law, and that principle obviously means that there cannot be one system of justice for one group of people and a different system of justice for others. And I have spent my career fighting for equal justice, and I'll tell you that everybody in a Department of Justice obviously has a duty to make sure that people get a fair shot. Unfortunately, recent reports suggest that the actions taken by the Justice Department leaders fall far short of their obligation to pursue equal and even-handed justice. For example, in 2011, the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel issued an opinion that paved the way for states to legalize online gambling. This opinion was opposed by Sheldon Adelson, and who's a major donor who spent millions of dollars to support President Trump. And his lobbyist also sent a memo to top DOJ officials asking that the opinion be reversed. And of course, then the OLC reversed the 2011 opinion in January of 2019. Has your office investigated whether political considerations motivated the Department of Justice's abrupt reversal of online gambling?
I'm fairly confident that we would be barred from doing that by the statutory prohibition. I don't think we would have legal authority to look at why the Office of Legal Counsel made a decision one way or the other unless there was a criminal allegation connected to it.
My time is up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I join with everybody else, Mr. Horowitz, for thanking you and your team for the work that you have done here. I'm going to go back to an issue that's been talked about by many of my colleagues today, and that is this question of bias. And actually, I want to start by going back to June of 2018, when you were last here before the committee. And when I asked questions of you at that time, I talked about your findings then with regard to bias. The specific focus that I recall there was Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and the information that's already been well presented here about what I consider to be the undeniable bias that they had against the President Trump. At that time, you made similar statements to those you made today, which is that you did not find bias in the decisions that you were evaluating in that report. But as I went through that with you, I think that you also confirmed that you were not saying that there was no bias by those who were involved in making decisions. Rather, you were saying you could not prove that that bias was a factor in their management of the activities they engaged in on behalf of the FBI. As I understood it, you said that there was bias, but in fact that you had asked them whether their bias influenced their work performance. They had told you that it did not, and you had no contrary evidence to dispute that. Is that correct?
Let me clarify. Let me explain. We found that those text messages evidenced bias, and what we ultimately found was that other people were involved and made many of those decisions, not them, and that was the base, not because we didn't know whether they were biased. Those texts evidenced bias by them.
All right.
The question was the other individuals who we didn't have text messages for, otherwise evidence of bias by those individuals.
And that would be consistent with what your report here today says. As I'm reading from the executive summary, Deputy Attorney General, I believe that's his title, Priestap.
Assistant Director or Deputy Assistant Director, depending upon the time period.
he's the one who made the final decision to open each of the 4 investigations.
Correct.
He did that in consultation with a number of others, including Peter Strzok.
Correct.
And you don't necessarily know what advice was given in those conversations, do you?
I don't.
But he made the final decision, and because you had and you've used the phrase very consistently here today, you did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias or improper motivation influenced the decision to open these 4 investigations.
Right.
Did you ask Mr. Priestap whether he had bias?
We asked all the witnesses, not just him, as to whether bias or other improper considerations had any impact. But we also looked for emails, text messages, documents that could show what we found, frankly, was Strzok and Page. I mean, if that is how you find evidence of bias. Now, beyond that, I'm stuck trying to understand what's in somebody's head if there's no other.
I just want to make it really clear what it is you are saying and what you are not saying.
Correct.
And in this case, what you're saying is that you could not find any documentary or testimonial evidence to contradict the statements of the investigators that they were not letting bias influence their decision.
Correct.
Do you believe that's an open question? I mean,
I can only speak to the evidence we found. I think the important point here, and I made earlier, is all the evidence is here. People are free to consider, evaluate what they think ultimately people's motivations were. We don't reach a definitive conclusion.
You aren't making that decision.
We're not making a decision on ultimately information, evidence we don't have that somebody may have acted.
But there's, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of most of us who have, on this side of the aisle at least, who have talked to you today, I think there's tons of evidence of bias here. In fact, you have referred for further action to the Attorney General, one case for criminal prosecution, if I understand it right, and other cases of how many other individuals?
So, but I want to be clear, we're talking now about the FISA as opposed to the opening.
I understand, and there is a distinction between the opening of the
very significant distinction
and the conduct of the investigation.
Correct.
And so I'm moving, I understand that. In fact, I appreciate
I've tried to separate those
clarification. Because in the conduct of the investigation, it appears to me there has been intense bias. But you're not making that judgment. I understand that. You're referring that to the Attorney General, correct?
Mm-hmm. And the FBI for adjudication,
and
consideration
the FBI,
of this.
Understood. And I believe in response to Senator Ernst's question on this same issue, you indicated that similarly, since you could not find any documentary evidence or testimonial evidence to contradict their statements that they were not biased, that leaves an open question as to what the FBI or the Attorney General will find with these referrals.
There are significant serious failures here on the operation of the, particularly in connection with the FISAs, whether it was sheer gross incompetence that led to this versus intentional misconduct and what the anything in between and what the motivations are. I can't tell you.
You're not making that decision.
I can't tell you as I sit here today because I don't have enough evidence to reach a conclusion.
But if someone were to characterize what you are telling us to be that you're telling us there is no bias here, that's not what you're telling us.
That is not as to the operation of these FISAs what I'm telling you.
All right, understood. And I did want to get to this question, though, about the operation of the FISAs. And again, you may not answer this, and that's fine. But it seems to me that if we go beyond the bias question to intentional versus grossly negligent, it seems to me that the kind of misconduct that has been presented by you and reviewed by our chairman and many others here today is mind-numbing to consider that it could be just accidental. Mm-hmm. Can you reach a conclusion like that?
I'd be skeptical, but I understand why people would be skeptical of that. There is such a range of conduct here that is inexplicable, and the answers we got were not satisfactory, that we're left trying to understand how could all these errors have occurred over a 9-month period or so among 3 teams, handpicked, one of the highest profile, if not the highest profile case in the FBI, going to the very top of the organization involving a presidential campaign.
Well, I understand that. I appreciate that. I think it is explicable. But I understand that you can't, or at least aren't going to make that jump. You are going to refer these cases. And I appreciate that. Is criminal prosecution a possible action in the cases other than the one you've specifically referred?
I wouldn't want to prejudice or prejudge anything. I'd leave it to the department to speak to you on that.
All right. Let me go on for just a moment. Let's move to the whistleblower question just once more. I'm shifting topics completely. It's come up several times today, and I understand your point that a whistleblower is entitled to anonymity. Explain to me how it happens that the person accused, when a whistleblower makes an accusation, can have the right that most Americans think they should have to confront those testifying against them. How is that accomplished?
So I'll speak to what we do. We get anonymous allegations frequently. We get people coming forward who are reporting misconduct who want to be anonymous, want to stay anonymous. So we get them both ways. We get people walking in saying, keep me anonymous, and anonymous complaints. We move forward on both if we think they're sufficient to move forward on and predicated and have support. But we then have to prove the allegations and get corroboration for it, because you're right, the individual, if there is a finding of misconduct, has a right to ultimately challenge the evidence found. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they get all the way back to where the nugget started if that information is corroborated through other means. And the IG Act requires us, actually, the law says, and Senator Grassley obviously has had a role in this, makes it quite clear. We are not, unless we're legally obligated to provide the information, the law requires us to do so. It's our obligation as IGs to keep that information.
Well, I appreciate that, because as you know, we may face that question here in the Senate relatively quickly. Last quick question, and I'm running out of time, so I just would like a quick answer if you could. I'm trying to find out who brought the Steele dossier to the attention of the FBI for the investigation. Was that Andrew McCabe or was that Bruce Orr?
So it was Steele in July 5th of 2016, going to his handling agent. The agent, there's a dispute whether he was a confidential source or not. We spend a number of pages on this. But the agent that Steele had a relationship with is the agent he went to with some of his reports. That agent then put it through a process at the FBI, and it then took from July 5th to September 19th to get the information to the Crossfire Hurricane team. Eventually, in that meandering over to what is that, 2.5 months, there's information that we conclude in here that Mr. McCabe was involved in referring it over to the Crossfire Hurricane team.
All right, thank you.
Long day, General. You've got sturdy kidneys.
Hopefully for 20 more minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm going to try to land this plane early. I believe the FBI is the premier law enforcement agency in all of human history. Would you disagree with that?
I would not.
But clearly we've got some bad apples. Mm-hmm. I want to thank you, and I want to thank your team for your usual superb job. After I haven't read the entire report. I'm about 70% of the way through, but I'm going to finish it. It's tedious.
Yes.
I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. It's supposed to be tedious.
Right.
After about 15% of the way through, it made me want to heave. After about 25% of the way through, I thought I dropped acid. It's surreal. I mean, I just couldn't believe it.
I've read it multiple times, and every time I read it, it
Let me ask you this.
surprises me.
How many members comprised the misfire hurricane team?
There were 3 teams over that period of time. I would venture to guess, again, depending on how you count them,
Just roughly.
at least half a dozen to a dozen on each of those iterations. I'll turn around and see if I'm somewhat close.
Does that include their supervisors?
Generally
All of
speaking.
them? Half dozen to a dozen?
And probably a little bit more if you're going to go all the way
Okay.
up the chain through all the different levels at the Bureau.
Do you or your team have a feel for how many of these folks are still at the FBI? I know you tried to answer that. Does anybody know that?
Well, the higher level people, as you know, have changed over in the last year. So the director, deputy director, et
Right.
cetera, the assistant director, deputy assistant director, a lot of people at the upper levels are no longer.
But are some
with
of the
Bureau.
actual agents,
Some of the agents are still there. Some
are
of the
they still
first-line
working on
supervisors.
FISA applications?
I would encourage you to speak to the FBI about that.
Yeah, well,
I
we
think they
will.
have.
Yeah, I think we will.
I think they've taken some steps in that regard, I
It's
understand.
It's easier to divorce your spouse around here than it is to get fired. That's clear, at least at the FBI. Is Mr. Orr still at the Department of Justice?
That my understanding is he is.
He's still there?
That's my understanding.
How long within the FBI, I know you just issued your
Yeah.
report, but how long within the FBI has this been knowledge?
So we sent the draft for classification.
Not
end of
your
August,
document,
September.
excuse me for
Oh, I'm sorry.
interrupting, but just the fact that there was a major league screw-up here.
It evolved over time. They did not know a lot of this until we found it.
But they
So,
know
for
it now,
example, the
right?
altered email, they
Chris
didn't know
Ray
that
knows
till
it now, though, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
That's what I was saying, as of the end of August.
all right. Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
Does it vindicate Mr. McCabe?
Same answer.
How about Ms. Page?
A little different there because as we found here, she wasn't involved in this, so I actually don't, it largely wasn't involved in this, so
She participated in the
in some discussions, but was not in the FISA chain, which is,
on that note, who briefed the agent that was sent to surveil Michael Flynn during the meeting with President Trump?
that was discussed up and down the chain at the FBI.
Okay,
So that was not a hidden fact or hidden information.
all right. I like the fact that you and your team are very precise in your language. I mean, frankly, I wish I wrote as well as you and your team do. No documentary evidence and no testimonial evidence. So you didn't find any documents that said, we did this to get Trump, right?
Or text messages
Right.
like the struck page
Right.
text messages.
And nobody who was involved in this circus without a tent looked you in the eye and said, yep, I did it to get Trump. Nobody did that.
Or, for example, a whistleblower come in or other people
Right.
tell us
But
they
none
heard
of
something
the
like
agents you
that.
talked to looked you in the eye and said, yeah, you're right, I did it to get Trump.
And nobody came in through a different means and said, I've got a problem here with this, what's going on.
I mean, you don't have to qualify as Mensa material to know not to do that to the Inspector General, right?
Yes, although, look at some of the text messages we found. So I'm not sure.
I understand.
That may be a counter narrative to that.
Well, I don't want to get too, I don't know what's the word, epistemological here, but is the absence of evidence always the evidence of absence?
No, it isn't.
So can you rule out categorically, unequivocally, and unconditionally that there was no bias here by the fact that you didn't find anything in writing and none of these chuckleheads looked you in the eye and said, yeah, I did it to get Trump?
Well, yeah, it's rare that I could tell you at any point in time, I could unequivocally 100% say this actually happened. So I get it. I will say that somewhat the difference on the opening is we concluded, based on the evidence, that Mr. Priestap opened it. We have not seen in last year's investigation or this investigation, looking through texts, emails, et cetera, talking to other people, any evidence that he did it for a improper purpose. Can I tell you 1,000% someone won't walk in a week and say, aha, you missed this? But
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let's talk about the people involved in the initial FISA application and the renewals. These are experienced people, right?
In this case, these were experienced people.
Many of them had professional degrees, include but not limited to law degrees, right?
I actually don't know what all their degrees were.
Okay. They knew the law.
They should have not only known the law, they should have known every single policy that they had to deal with
I
here.
mean, they were handpicked by Mr. McCabe, right?
They were handpicked.
Okay. This wasn't their first rodeo.
It certainly wasn't, with maybe an exception or two towards the end, of relatively new agents coming on board.
Well,
But that, to me, should not have been an excuse, just to
Sure.
be clear.
Well, it just seems to me that it has to be one or two things, either incompetence or intentional conduct.
I agree. It's either sheer incompetence, intentionality, or something perhaps in between.
So which
Rosne-
do you think it is?
We've got so many different people here. First of all, it wouldn't be fair to lump everybody into one because there are different actors coming in at different times. Some people have more touches of this than others. I think it's fair for people to sit there and look at all of these 17 events and wonder how it could be purely incompetence. Okay?
Well, I want to thank you again. I know this puts you in a tough spot.
This is-
And I hope you'll tell your colleagues back at the FBI that we appreciate their work,
Absolutely.
but this got to be fixed.
Yeah.
Senator
Somebody's
Black,
got, at a minimum, somebody's got to be fired.
yeah,
Agree completely. There's got to be a change in the culture also.
I'm done.
agreed. Thank you.
I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General, I know you're happy to see the end of the dais coming at you. You're going to get out of here. Let me pick up right where Senator Kennedy left off, because I will tell you the perception by the American people from reading your report, and we've all put up links so that people can read it, is that this was intentional, that it was deliberate, that it was malicious, it was premeditated and well thought out, and that it is conducted by people who were desperate. In essence, it is the epitome of the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
It is murky and muddy, and people weren't going to get their way, and this guy who was going to win and then did win didn't deserve to win. And it does have the appearance of intentionality, because you would not have this series of unfortunate coincidences. That is not what it is. It is the surveillance state at work. This is what they did. And they took their professional place and those tools that they had at their disposal to go spy on a campaign and on U.S. citizens, which is unbelievable. And you've heard it from several today that people can't believe this happened. And you can say, yes, there are sins of omission here, but there are also sins of commission. And they were deliberate and intentional and very malicious. and the way they went about this. I want to talk a little bit about Christopher Steele. I was looking in Appendix A, I think it's page 419, and it says in there he was paid $95,000 over a 3-year period of time, I believe.
Correct.
Okay, and what was that money paid to him for?
So that would have been for various pieces of information that he gave to the
Okay, so
FBI after
that's-
being a CHS in 2013.
All right?
But not related to be clear, not related to Crossfire Hurricane.
Correct.
Between
But-
13 and 16.
Right,
2013
he was
16.
considered a trusted source, and thereby he
Correct.
was paid.
Correct.
Okay, and then he began working with Fusion GPS in June of 2016, and that really should have raised some alarm bells with you all. November comes along of that year, and you drop Steele as a source,
Well,
correct?
the FBI dropped Steele.
Yes, the FBI drops him. He wasn't trusted anymore, and that was because he blew his cover.
Correct.
Started talking to the media, and they should have stopped relying on him at that point, correct?
Under FBI rules, once you're closed, you're closed. You need certain approvals to start reinitiating and reengaging.
That's right. But the FBI kept using him, correct?
They met with him through Bruce Orr.
Yes, and they used him for information after he was cut off,
They received that information.
right, 13 different times.
Correct.
Correct, okay. So then we get this dossier. It is used as a big part of setting up this entire process for the FISA application. And Christopher Steele, people at the FBI know Christopher Steele was untrustworthy. He was an untrustworthy foreign actor. He was a political hack. He didn't like Trump. He was being paid by the Clintons, but they still pushed forward with using him and exercised extremely poor judgment, correct?
Certainly, once they found out that he had done, they had decided to close him, they should have followed the rules if they wanted to reengage with him, but they had plenty of information to question the validity and the bona fides of some of the reporting.
Should Bruce Orr be held criminally responsible for his conduct?
We make a recommendation to the department
And that's for
to
others
review.
to make.
Others will make the
Yes.
decision.
Let me ask you, a couple of times we've heard about lower level FBI agents and lawyers who had generated some of these inaccuracies, these 17 inaccuracies. So what is the process for supervisors fact-checking?
So under the Woods procedures, these factual accuracy procedures put in place in response to prior instances found of the failure to accurately relay information to the court, the first-line supervisor is supposed to go through and recheck the process to
But
make
that
sure
did
it was
not
done.
happen
That
here.
did not happen here,
And
on
why
multiple
did that-
occasions.
Right. And why did that not happen on these multiple occasions that this work was not checked?
Because we were given explanations ranging from a lack of understanding of the process to
So they were trying to skirt not only the rules, but the law,
we got a lot of explanations that we didn't find particularly
that
satisfactory.
they were skirting the law. I think what they did to Carter Page, as you have heard, is just unbelievable. Let me ask you this. How often do you find mistakes in a FISA application?
Well, this is actually the first time my office has done a deep dive into a particular application. We've done higher level reviews on the FISA process and have found various issues at a higher level, but this is the first time we've actually been able to delve in this way to a
It's
FISA.
a fairly unusual occurrence.
Let me put this, I would hope so.
If it's not an unusual occurrence, there are more cultural problems than you know about at the FBI, correct?
That's correct.
I would say so, too. Okay. I want to touch on accountability in the short amount of time that I have left, because I think it is absolutely just infuriating to the American people that those who executed this exercise, which should have been called Operation Takedown Trump, because that's what they were doing, that they are still getting a taxpayer-funded paycheck, they're still getting taxpayer-funded benefits and vacation time. When they take off for Christmas, they're going to be on the taxpayer dime. And you know, around here, from time to time, you'll hear people talk about those that went after the late Senator Stevens. One of them still working for the U.S. Attorney's Office up in Anchorage. Another one is working in Spokane. Senator Stevens was found to be innocent, and they're still getting a government paycheck. So we want to make certain that disciplinary action is taken. I know you were asked about case agent number 1. He is still there. What about SSA 1, who did the security briefing? Still employed?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so he is still using our money to fund his lifestyle. And the lawyer, we know, is going to have face criminal referrals, correct?
I'm just going to stick with what we say in here, which is we referred it to the Attorney General and the FBI Director.
Okay. The FBI sent a supervisory, no, I don't want to ask you that. We know, I think we know the answer to that. Peter Strzok approved the request to expedite the first FISA application, and he, along with Lisa Page, pushed for the expedition of the first application with DOJ officials, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we know that she was, in answer to what Senator Kennedy asked you, she was involved in the line of communication and the setup of this, correct?
She was involved in at least the one meeting that we identify in the report.
Okay, and I found it curious in your report, and this is the reason I ask it. You said that they had no role in the preparation of the approval of any of the 4 FISA warrant applications. So I guess if you're saying not putting pen to paper and giving a nod or an up or down.
They were not in the, there's a
Okay.
substantial chain of approval that has to go on at the FBI. They were not in the chain that had to sign off on it, but they did get involved, as you indicated, in pushing the department to get answers to,
They were
can we move
involved in the
forward?
process, but just not
In that way.
final approval.
They did not have responsibility at any step of this for
Okay,
signing.
we're going to get you out of here maybe a few seconds early. I just want to thank you and your team very much for the patience, for being here, for the report that you've given. I think that many of us look forward to what General Durham is going to say when he takes up some of this. But I think it's important to note also, this is not the first time something has happened like this in one of our federal agencies. And the reaction when I'm at home in Tennessee from people is they cannot believe the absolute maliciousness that took place with this. It is not unfortunate coincidences. It is the surveillance state. Yield back.
And if I could just thank you also. We mentioned Senator Stevens and the bill that Senator Lee has pending that you co-sponsored and joined. I appreciate your support for our work. Thank you.
We're truly near the end. Senator Hirano has one question.
One question. Thank you so much, Mr.
Great.
Chairman. So, Mr. Horowitz,
Yeah.
you are investigating for 19 months, 100 witnesses, 1 million documents. You even have a hotline for whistleblowers.
Right.
So did any whistleblowers come forward during your investigation with any concern that errors were made intentionally or out of bias against Trump? I mean, for example, I'm looking at the footnote on page 339 of your report, and it cites some of the very colorful pro-Trump tweets that were made by some of the FBI agents. One would think that if they knew anything, they would have contacted you in the 19-month investigation that you conducted. Did anybody come forward?
We did not have any such evidence.
So no documents, no testimony, no one coming forward to complain. That would be another way of gauging motives, as you put it, correct?
Correct.
No one came forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.